If you were to tell me that on Monday I would be talking about a heartbreaking loss to Florida State, if this was me on Friday, I would have said you're crazy. But here we are. We're talking about a loss and one that kind of stung. We'll get into everything that happened. We have Mitch here joining us to talk all about it.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black, editor and publisher of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Sports Network. With me today, I have Mitch. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. So as I kind of kick this off, Mitch, definitely not the game we're expecting, but still, this one stings more than I expected it would. How are we doing?
I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. I picked BC to cover, and I felt super comfortable with that prediction. And I was right, obviously. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, I'm also just tired from watching about 50 penalties in all the games I watched this past weekend, and with BC and Colorado State combining for, I think, 40 of them. So it was a weird week of football. And that's the thing. Whenever anybody says it's like a bad slate of games for any given week, that's when stuff really pops off. Like you get all these weird games. I don't think there were too many true upsets, but you had a lot of wonky games, including this one.
All right, let's get into this. So BC comes out hot in this game. Great first drive where they score on a touchdown pass to Lewis Bond, and it kind of sets the tone for what we're going to talk about in this first half, which is Thomas Castellanos. Now, just a week removed after he got that personal foul, he was being cocky, he was making, all sorts of hand gestures or whatever. He goes out there and has a game, one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best quarterbacking performances I've seen out of BC in a long time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was rewatching the game again, and he still has a lot of room to grow. He's a young quarterback, but I mean, obviously, he was huge with his legs. Whether it was designed to run or scramble, you saw him, pick up a lot of third and longs, convert a lot of those first downs when BC really needed them. But as we've seen every week, and I always say that player development isn't linear, but I mean, you're over these 3 games, you've seen a very strong, positive upward trend of his play. He's making decisions faster. He's getting the ball out faster on like longer design passing plays and RPOs. And obviously he gets the ball out quick, but I posted the throw. It was 3rd and 20. It was the driver BC ultimately, it was their last offensive drive, and they ultimately punted, but the throw on 3rd and 20 where he's rolling out to his right and just throws a laser right to Ryan O'Keefe. So, I mean, this guy clearly, we had our whole episode about kind of how the issue with the quarterback position and how that was handled over the offseason, how we didn't agree with it. But I think that Castellanos being the starter, like, clearly makes a lot of sense in terms of his talent. And I think that this team is better off for it because when you have an athletic quarterback like this, it really gives your offense a higher floor because he has that athleticism to make plays where if the receivers aren't getting open or what have you, then he can at least create something out of nothing, which we saw a lot of. But you saw that throw to O'Keefe earlier. There was one where he threw him. He was getting pressured. He threw a great deep ball to O'Keefe, a deep crosser, had a few really nice throws on in-breaking routes, kind of over the middle of the field, which is something that I was a little concerned about him with because he is a shorter quarterback. So you wonder, how well does he see over the offensive line? That's kind of a traditional issue we've seen with guys like Russell Wilson and Drew Brees, but he's getting better at that. He had the interception, which was definitely a mistake. I rewatched that play and I couldn't even figure out what the play call was because there was a lot of things going on. Not a lot of it made sense. And I don't know if he was just trying to really throw the ball away, but he threw the ball to a spot where there were 2 receivers kind of in the same area, which is always a bad sign. And it obviously got picked off. And then that kind of allowed Florida State to, they had just scored. That gave them good field position. They were able to score easily again. So that kind of put them in that hole. But I think overall you're seeing a really encouraging progression and growth of him as a quarterback, and obviously as a leader. We have seen how his emotional play does hype up his teammates, but in this game, you saw him be poised down the stretch where BC kept needing scores, and he kept leading them on good drives to get them the points they needed to come back in this game. So, again, I think we rightfully got on him last week for what he did, but I think we're all very impressed and happy with what he's doing as a quarterback, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see what he can do this year, even though assuming they can get the penalties issues fixed.
All right. We have a lot to talk about, and I could honestly do a whole episode on how Castellanos looked and his it factor, which I think it is kind of a corny thing to talk about because it's like an intangible.
I mean, with quarterback, it isn't like there is that. I mean, again, it is kind of does sound kind of stupid, but it is a thing. There are guys that have it, and there are guys that don't. Like it just that is what it is.
So yeah, we can talk more about Castellanos at that time, but we have a lot to talk about, and I want to stick with the offense here. I want to talk about the offensive line because they were kind of Jekyll and Hyde with some of the penalties, which we'll get into later. But I want to just get into the positive parts of how they played because I thought they had an excellent game, at least, man on man against a very good Florida State defensive line.
Yeah, I agree. Once the ball got snapped, these guys were dominating. And obviously, Florida State does have a good defensive line. They made their plays for sure. Jared Verse had a good day, and they had some other tackles for loss. But I mean, the way that Castellanos was able to stand in the pocket and have a super clean pocket for a long time, and with Castellanos, I've mentioned this about how BC's defense is kind of should attack mobile quarterbacks. They kind of slow down the rush so that the quarterback can't just get out and escape. And I think they might have been doing that early on, but then on the last drive, and I think this is kind of where things started to fall apart, is you saw Florida State blitz a lot more, and they got home with some of those, and that's what led to some of those sacks. But anyways, yeah, I mean, other than that, that's later in the game, but I still think the offensive line did so well. Only 7 pressures on 38 dropbacks, which was 18%. And I know some of those were on screens, so you can kind of not count those because for lack of a better phrase, the quarterback is kind of just supposed to be pressured on those because you want to suck the defenders down into the pocket so you can get that screen pass going. But yeah, in the run game, it was a bit of a mixed bag, but I think the thing that we were concerned about is that, okay, this offensive line has dominated a MAC team and an FCS team on the ground. How are they going to do when they face a Power 5 defensive line on one of the best teams in the country? And I think they had some good plays. They had some missed blocks. They had 1 or 2 holding penalties. Some, I would say one of them was more questionable than the other, but overall I was very satisfied with their performance. They gave Robichaud enough running lanes to, get some yards. Cam Barfield had a bit of a tougher day, and also on the design runs to Castellanos, he had a lot of room to work. Sometimes he made some mistakes and ran right up the butts of his offensive lineman, which, I think that'd be easier to analyze when you have the all 22 and you can kind of see what he's seeing as opposed to the broadcast film. But, I've been super impressed with their performance. And I know, that there's, the ingredients are very different, but I think a lot of people were really disappointed with the Matt Applebaum hire and kind of, well, why is he just coming back? Like he's going to ruin this offensive line. And I tried to kind of defend the hire because I don't think he's a bad coach. Maybe he's not the best coach. And sure, he's not as good of an offensive line coach or developer as Steve Adazio. I'll stipulate to that. But it's clear that and again, last year, Googs did not have a lot of talent to work with. But I think you can see just how much having a guy that is competent and has a good relationship with the guys in the room, how much he has improved this group. And again, there's not as many injuries. We did see Logan Taylor go down and Jude Bowery play for most of the game. And I thought Bowery performed pretty decently. And of the guys on the offensive line, if any of them were to get hurt, I would say Taylor would be the biggest or the least significant loss because I thought he was the shakiest of all them. So getting Bowery in for some snaps, and I thought he performed well. So yeah, I think this offensive line is really just the catalyst for how this offense has been able to score points because, I know the games have been wonky and they've been strange, but the offense has been scoring points. 24 in the first game. Granted, you need to go to overtime, but week 1, you're figuring stuff out. Next week, you get 31 points, and this week you get 29 points, and you have some extra points and conversions left on the board. So, this offense is definitely scoring points, and they're moving the ball pretty well, and they can do it both on the ground and through the air. So, I know that the games have been weird and there haven't been the results we want, but say what you will, this offense is pretty fun to watch.
All right. We've been really positive, and now we're going to dive back into the
Yeah.
sewer and get into talking about penalties in just a moment. You're going to want to hear our thoughts on that. Now, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you ever find that you're just trying to fall asleep? Your brain suddenly won't stop talking? After this last BC game, I felt like my brain was doing that. Do your thoughts start racing right before bed at our other inopportune moments? It turns out one way to get those racing thoughts to go away is to talk them through. You can get someone at BetterHelp with therapy that gives you a place to do just that. So you can get out of your negative thought cycles and find some mental and emotional peace. Are thoughts about penalties driving you crazy? Are you thinking about the 18 penalties that Boston College had this weekend? And it's racing thoughts. You just can't get it to stop. Better check it out at BetterHelp. If you've ever thought about it, this is the time to do it now. So get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedoncollege today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedoncollege. Locked On BC, this is AJ Black, and we're going to start talking about something I think everyone was talking about yesterday, which were those darn flags, which came out a lot. I think it was 21 flags were thrown at BC, 18 were accepted, and BC set a school record for most penalties in one game. This just coming after Jeff Halfley said the week before, very, I don't want to say snidely, but he was very terse that he was going to fix this stuff. And it just got exponentially worse. I want to get Mitch's thoughts on this. As I sat in the press box and just watched it happen over and over and over again, penalties just killing BC. What were your thoughts watching this?
So the first thing I want to say is that not all penalties are created equal. And I think this is something that Halfley, I think he might have said it exactly, or
he said that exact word.
Yes. And that was the case last week where you have guys playing hard. There's a lot of the special teams, unnecessary roughness penalties, and those ones are harder to coach out because you do want guys playing hard. Those are different from, spur of the moment, the hands to the face penalty last week. I would say the face mask penalty this week and the one earlier when on Donovan Ezra when he was trying to sack Jordan Travis, you just reach up a hand to try to, get the quarterback or get the ball, and it hits the face mask, and, it's a bang bang thing. And that's, you're coaching guys to play hard, and that sometimes that is just unlucky. The false starts are a different story. And I think because you're in the press box, you might not have heard this, but the announcers were mentioning that there's something about Castellanos' inflection or cadence or the way he just says the snap count that sometimes the offensive line hears as the actual snap indicator, and that's what was causing some of the issues. And then Halfley also talked about how they wanted to install this offensive package where they wanted to drain clock, so they wanted to stay in the huddle for a while, then get out of the huddle quickly and snap the ball. And that was another reason why a lot of those false starts kept happening. For that reason, and I was saying this while I was watching the game, if you are going to try to do this hurry up thing and you can't do it without penalties, then you can't do it. Do not do it, because we saw it. You lose so many yards because you're trying to do this wonky out. And especially in the upcoming games where they have to go on the road, that stuff's not going to work. So I don't know what exactly they need to do to drill this more, but they got to get it figured out because, it's been a significant problem, especially this past week. And, it's an emotional game. It's the first ACC game. It's, you're playing against a good opponent. So you're, maybe a little more on edge. So you see those things happen. But, and this is why I said after Halfley made those comments about how it's going to get fixed, I said, well, frankly, I'm not going to believe him until there's a noticeable change. And frankly, the noticeable change went in the wrong direction, in that BC had they pretty much doubled their entire penalty count in one game. So again, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to believe that it's going to be fixed until I see that it is fixed.
All right. So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought this up and I texted Mitch this earlier. I want you're good into the scheme stuff. What is disconcerting signals? What does that mean?
So disconcerting signals is when the defensive players try to simulate the snap count or give out like a faux audible or something in order to try to draw the offense into a false start. And usually it's clapping. If a linebacker claps, or the first one was on Nito Ekpala, and he pumped his arms kind of like he was running in place. And did it really fast, and that's what they called it on, which in terms of the letter of the law of that rule, I kind of get it, but it's still like, okay, you're reaching into the bag there. The second one was absolute crap because what happened is that George Rooks shifted in his gap. He shifted down the line. It's a lateral move. You're allowed to do that. He's not in the neutral zone. And that caused the offensive lineman to jump as a false start. That is legal. Teams do that all the time. They shift their offense. They shift their defensive lines for the purposes of drawing false starts because that is legal. Now, granted, maybe the college rule is a little different, but I know that they do that in the NFL. I know that the Steelers do this a ton where they will, I believe it's called stemming, where they slide their defensive line as a unit, like together, and then that will cause the offense to false start, and that's fine. So I don't know
do
why
that in Madden all the time.
Yeah, you can kind of do that where you shift the line, and that's basically what they were doing, and that's very legal.
Right.
And then the fact that they called it a false start rightfully and then flipped the penalty to the defense was absolutely insane. So, and Hafley was like, I think he said something about like trying to explain what was going on at the refs, and it's like, well, I don't really know what you need to explain with regards to Akpala's penalty. I don't know why he did that, and that was just stupid. But yeah, I mean, the penalties, I think it's fair to say that if the penalties are under control, BC probably they have at least a much better chance of winning this game. I know you mentioned this on the quick recap episode, but according to Game on Paper, BC lost 9.96 expected points added from penalties. So essentially, expected points added is a measure where from any point on the field at any down and distance and any given time in the game, you can kind of predict how many points the offense is going to score from that point, and every play changes the expected points. That's the expected points added. So every time there was a penalty, that would knock down BC's EPA, and it happened enough that they lost 9.96 points from penalties, which is crazy. And I think some of the other coaching stuff that I wanted to bring up, and I mean that this is another thing, and there's a comment about it. We don't need to bring it up, but just it was. I think FSU had one penalty going into halftime. BC had 10, and and again, this is very fan speak, but like I could have sworn I saw holdings on Florida State. There was a time where Jared Verse tackled Kai Robichon and stood over him and said something. It's like that's taunting. They got a little more even in the second half.
Right.
But that was just like, okay. And I think the announcers kind of mentioned this too, is that when you have a team that is known for being penalized a lot, it kind of creates this feedback loop where the refs are looking for it because they know it's a heavily penalized team, and then they become more heavily penalized and so on and so forth. But some of the other coaching stuff that I want to talk about is these like decisions on fourth downs and going for two. And the first one is,
hold on, we're going to pause you there because I'm going to go. I need to just get to this next read.
Okay. No problem.
And then we'll go right into, I have the third is like anything Mitch wants to talk about.
Okay.
All right. So we'll get back to that in just a moment. So now time for your game changer of the week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Much like Thomas Castellanos, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beer that actually tastes good. I mean, we saw Castellanos making plays. He looked like a game changer out there. And he was, when things were not working, he did everything in his power to turn that game around and almost win it for the Eagles. Now, Athletic Brewing Company has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game because they make actually tasting good non-alcoholic beers, such as IPAs, golden sours, and more. They're great tasting, they're award-winning, and they're constantly changing their flavor profiles. You're never going to find, the same kinds. You can always find new stuff. So first-time customers can use promo code Locked On to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off. Athletic Brewing Company. Near beer. Exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all time. All right. As I said, I'm going to let Mitch just have his thoughts here for a moment because I know he has a lot he wants to talk about. And gonna say we're gonna get back. I gotta get back to the Patriots game in a little bit. I don't know why I want to watch it. Mitch and I both are rooting for terrible football teams this year. Mitch, go ahead. What were you going to talk about in terms of coaching?
So the first one that came up was when BC scored. I guess it was the defensive touchdown, the recovery by Kari Johnson, and BC elected to go for two at that point, and they were down 22-31. And at first I was like, okay, I'm fine with this because if you get the score, then you're down by 7, and you're gonna have to go for 2 eventually. They went for it, they didn't get it, and then that kind of, it didn't necessarily play a real factor in the end outcome, but it was something that I was thinking about. And I think in hindsight, I get why they did it, but they probably should have kicked it, because then you are within 8. The next time you score a touchdown, you still need to get a 2-point conversion. But if you do that, then the game is tied. And I didn't love the play call that they did when they went for 2 that time. I think it was just like a rollout to the trip side. It was where Lewis Bond made an amazing catch. He just couldn't get it in bounds. But didn't love that play call. But and then the other one that I didn't necessarily agree with was the 4th and 1 where Thomas Castellanos actually scored. But at that point, BC is still down 31-22. I don't remember how much time was left. I think there was like 5 minutes-ish or something, maybe a little more. But I was very against that call, because basically if BC doesn't get that, then FSU gets the ball back. BC is still down by a lot. Whereas at that point, again, you still need 2 scores. So you kick the field goal. Then if you score a touchdown, you still have to score a touchdown, but you are within 1 score if you kick the field goal there. Luckily, they got it. Thomas Castellanos made a great play running the ball, so it didn't matter as much. Other than those 2 things, though, I did think that Hafley did a pretty good job of being aggressive. The time where they went for it on 4th and didn't get it, I wasn't a huge fan of the play call, but I liked the decision to do it. It was the 4th and 2 that Robichaux didn't convert. But, at that point, it's like, if we kick a field goal, it's still a 2-score game. It doesn't matter. And, I'm not saying this directly led to this, but on the ensuing Florida State drive, that's where BC scored the defensive touchdown. So you have these, and I'm not saying, if they had kicked the field goal, then, and that's things you can't play it out exactly, because if you can't say, oh, if they kick the field goal, then Florida State still has the fumble that returns touchdown. Not necessarily true. Right. But other than that, they went for it on 4th down a lot. They were very successful on it, except for that one time. Robichaux had a great day at converting those plays. And BC was thriving in 3rd and super longs because of penalties, which was kind of funny to watch, where it'd be like, oh, 3rd and 20, we got him right where we want him. And then, Castellanos making an amazing play. But I think that the general attitude of being aggressive, going for it on those 4th downs, when they were down late, it's like, okay, we don't need field goals. We need to score touchdowns to win this game. I thought the squib kick that was fumbled was a great decision, because, you rarely recover onside kicks anymore just because you don't have that running start. So, kind of trying to get it in the midfield and hoping that the bounce of the ball, it is somewhat random, but hey, that one broke BC's way. So that I like that attempt. Other stuff, I think that it's tough to, say the defense did a good job when they allowed 31 points, especially when they kind of came in bunches. But, I thought that the way that they schemed this up with the very aggressive corners playing press on the outside, Keon Coleman did nothing, which was amazing. Both Elijah Jones and Amari Jackson did a great job stopping him. Like you said on the recap episode, Johnny Wilson had that one big play, which was BC did a cover 0 blitz. They brought 7. They had Cole Batson be like the spy down low, and everybody else was in man coverage. And, sometimes you get burned on those. That's just how it works. And Elijah Jones, that was his one catch he let up. But other than that, he was really good that whole day. I think that the John Pupil experiment needs to come to an end. He got really exposed in this game multiple times. I feel like you could tell that FSU was targeting him on the touchdown to Jaheim Bell, where they sent Bell in motion across the field and they saw that Pupil was in man following him. I feel like they were looking for that matchup, and now that it's on tape, other teams are going to look for that matchup too. So I think you need to get Victor Nelson on the field more. Maybe even get Kari Johnson some more snaps. He finally played in this game. It was only, I think, 8 snaps, and he had the great fumble recovery. But John Pupil is too much of a liability in pass coverage at this point to be relied upon. He's a decent run defender. Not I wouldn't say great. He's decent. He made a few nice plays, but he just does not have the athleticism and speed necessary to be a quality starter on this defense right now. They need people who are better in coverage, and actually this was one of BC's better games in terms of run defense. I thought they did a really good job getting penetration. They did a really good job getting off blocks. Again,
Trey Benson didn't. I don't know.
No. I mean, he had a touchdown, but didn't. There were no really big chunk runs. All of Florida State's big plays came through the air, which, that kind of. I mean, they found their matchup they liked with Jaheim Bell, who was somebody I was worried about, and he obviously burned BC a few times, but the fact that they weren't getting just mossed by the 2 outside receivers on every play was a very encouraging development. So, and I think, in terms of the scoring, you give Florida State really good field position with that touchdown after Castellanos' interception. I am really concerned about this defense coming out of halftime. This is 3 games in a row where they have allowed the offense to go down the field pretty quickly and score a touchdown. Again, I am of the belief that the quote halftime adjustments are overblown and not as important, and there's not as much time to actually make big adjustments. But whatever whatever they're doing, like it needs to change. That needs to change too, because BC's defense just getting worked out of the half. So I don't know if they need to do more to change what they're doing, maybe do less adjustments than what they're doing. I don't know, but that's got to change because it's every time BC's getting the ball first, and luckily the last 2 games they've scored in their opening drive. But now a lot of teams are taking advantage of what is called the middle 8, which is the 4 minutes before and after halftime. And a lot of teams are scoring right before the half, and then they get the ball back, and then they score again. And when you can do that, that really increases your probability of winning games, where you can get those 2 back-to-back scores. So BC's got to find a way to be better out of the half, either make, I'm not exactly sure what yet, but make more or fewer adjustments. But overall, I liked what their scheme was for this opponent, because they did a good job stopping the run. They forced FSU to not throw to their 2 big receivers as much and force them to go to their tertiary weapons, which when you do that and one of them is burning you, it's like, okay, this is how we decided to scheme this. This is the way we lived it, because especially with how BC's defense has been playing, you can't game plan to just stop everybody. They just don't have that kind of talent right now. You have to kind of pick one matchup where you say, okay, we are more worried about these 2 wide receivers, for example. If the tight end beats us sometimes, we are going to have to live with that. And on the one play, it was the play that was almost touchdown, but they ruled him down at the 1. BC's in a cover 3 zone. So they've got the 2 outside corners are playing deep thirds on the outside. And then you've got the deep middle safety. And Jaheim Bell just kind of runs a seam route right between the 2 thirds, and the defender that is underneath there just doesn't get enough depth to cover that seam. So that's just like an execution mistake and I think that was actually Cam Arnold. So, for a veteran player who has background as a safety, he's got to know that you got to get more depth there. So, I think this, as much as it can be, for a loss that was pretty heartbreaking, there was a lot of, and obviously with the penalties, that's a huge issue, but a lot of encouraging things to look forward to. And, now BC gets into the heart of their schedule, where there are some, shall we say, opponents of lower quality. Louisville is 3-0. It is the BC's first road game, so that's going to be a challenge. But I mean, I have watched some of Louisville now in preparation for this week, and I'm not overly impressed. I mean, they've had 2 close games against Georgia Tech and Indiana, and then they blew out an FCS opponent on a short week. So cool. But I'm not super impressed with Louisville. I think they could be had if BC, corrects these penalties. Again, that's a huge if. And, if the offense continues to grow and the defense, the defense also needs to figure out a way to get a pass rush, because this is another 0 on the stat sheet for Donovan Zaraku in terms of pressures. I don't know what's going on with him, but he has just been a non-factor so far this season. And I'm sure offenses are game planning to stop him. But in that case, then the defensive coaching staff has to find ways to get him some better opportunities. But then later in the schedule, you've got Army's looking good. Their new offense is doing good. So that's going to be tougher. But UVA is pretty bad. Georgia Tech's pretty bad. Virginia Tech's pretty bad. So, and UConn is 0-3, I think. Yeah, they're 0-3.
Pitt's really bad.
Pitt is really bad. I think by then they'll make a quarterback change. And if they don't, then, we can talk about that when that happens. But, if BC if the offense continues to grow as we've seen, if the defense can make some tweaks and they can get this penalty issue fixed, there is still a pretty realistic path for BC to get back to a bowl eligible season.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to run, Mitch. We're running out of time. So I'll have you back on. We'll talk about Louisville later this week. But thank you for all of your insight. I know you had a lot you wanted to talk about because it was a very dense game. So, Mitch, where can people find you?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. You can find my work on Eagle Insider. We're doing the game rewatches. I'm still kind of trying to figure out how I'm going to frame this one because, again, the offense was pretty good, and I thought given the circumstances, the defense performed as well as they could. So it'll be kind of this one might be be structured a little differently. So, but yeah, just check out my work there.
All right, and this is AJ Black. You can follow me at AJ Black 247 and become a subscriber to read Mitch's game rewatches. Get all the recruiting news. I've got an insider update on a committed recruit to another school that was at this game, and I heard things went really well, and I'll have that up in the morning, so you want to check that out as well. Thank you all so much for listening. You guys are the lifeblood of this podcast, and we're growing every single day. It's all because of you. Thank you for spreading the word about Locked On BC, and thank you all for listening tonight. We'll see you all again soon. Take care, everyone.